Well, welcome back. I hope you're well, and as always, it is um, certainly a pleasure to have you return. I'd like to speak about the whole issue of race and the issue about the United Kingdom as particularly um, lately perceived to be some form of a racist country as a result of Meghan and Prince Harry's recent statements. Let me start by saying a few, I guess, overarching statements. I have no intention of denying people of their lived experiences, but I will be making broad generalizations in my conversation. I use broad generalizations because they are necessary when you speak of a larger population, and because they are broadly true if you are going to speak to a large group, a large sample size. Anecdotal experiences notwithstanding, in my opinion, are statistically insignificant. So whilst what I share, and when I use my anecdotal experience, I'd like you to keep in mind that it is my experience. It's anecdotal. It is evidence of an anecdote. It doesn't mean I can extrapolate that to the general population. However, I am going to juxtapose my personal experience with the general population and observations. And I will hope that at the end, perhaps you have a better picture of what a great country the United Kingdom really is. Now, much has been said over the past decade, but even more so over the past 3 years. Interestingly, the George Floyd incident, when it occurred, I recall saying specifically to a number of friends and loved ones that the BLM movement was going to do more to harm the black community than help. My words was very specific. I believed that the demonstrations and the uproar and the social unrest and even the violence and all of what ensued following the death of George Floyd would set the black community at least 25 to 30 years backwards. The black community in the West. There were several reasons, and I have no intention of going into that, but I would hope that most people can start to see some of the, what I call the birthing pains of such actions. In any case, the past decade has been a unique one. Leading up to the end of 2022, we've never had such an attack on the institution that we all love and share in the United Kingdom as we have in the past few years. Harry and Meghan leaving and their continuous attack has done more harm. People around the world often reach out to me and ask for my opinion, because most people generally believe what they listen to or hear in the media. So most people feel that the account of the story by the storytellers, Meghan and Harry, are true. Well, my intention is not to deny them of their experiences. But let me share something that I think has been my general observation. I have come to the conclusion, and the conclusion has been consistent for decades, that those who complain are, generally speaking, especially in the West, are those who cannot compete, are not willing to compete, perhaps have a lack of meaning in their lives, lack purpose, are looking to profit in whatever means by this race mongering and division professing. That is my perspective. If you've ever noticed, the people who represent those who share my ethnic image in the media, they generally have accomplished very little. These are people who are in media, showbiz, politics, or people off the streets. They are not representative of the average working person. The average working person does not have time to show up at the news stations and complain about what someone thinks about the color of their skin, because they have work to get to. They have a family to feed. They have a life to lead. So the media has one thing it always is after, which is views. And if it can sell a story, it doesn't matter who it uses on either side to stoke division with the intention of generating interests. Quite frankly, when I hear of race issues, I have almost no interest. I have no interest not because it doesn't exist, but it exists at the margins. It's statistically insignificant. The United Kingdom is a great country. It's a special country. It's a loving country. It's a kind country. It has great people. Those people come in different colors. The indigenous ones, the Anglo-Saxons, or those of such heritage, are good people. Yes, we all have a past, some of which we're not proud of, but nonetheless, they are good people. Those who have different shades or have a cultural background that are not Anglo-Saxons are great people. I have had the rare opportunity to have met and made friends with people from all over the world who are all British subjects. They share a common identity as British subjects, but they have an ancestry line, lineage, and ethnicity that is not Anglo-Saxon, that has come from different trees planted originally in various parts of the world. The common identity is that we are all Brits. We're Englishmen. We're English women. What we have more in common, the love for the land, the love for country, the willingness to die for this land, the willingness to defend our loved ones on the land, but also the recognition that wherever we are, should something happen to us, the commonwealth of the nation and the power of Her Majesty's, or His Majesty's, I should say, his kingdom will come to assist and to help and to free us from whatever errors or sins we may have committed on a different land. Now let me start by saying this. I am British subject. I am also proudly, and I should say very proudly, Nigerian. I have the rare, unlike most or some people in England, to have had the opportunity to experience different cultures. The Nigerian culture is very unique. Africa has 54 countries. each distinctively different, both in ethnicity, religion, preferences, tastes, cultures, values, beliefs, language. But within Nigeria itself, we are very different people. And I have seen, and I have experienced, those cultural differences. What I find fascinating is that in Nigeria and in most parts of Africa, because we are more of a monolith in ethnic image, we do not use the word race. We use the word tribal. So what you see is different tribes behaving differently when they interact with other tribes. We are tribal in Africa. We are tribal in Nigeria. What we call racism is simply tribal preferences for or against people who do not share the same ethnic image. So, a black person feels that, and let me give the devil his due, not that I'm suggesting that the black person is the devil, I'm saying the accusation, if a black person feels that he's been accused by the white person of certain things based on his skin color, he says the white person is racist. If you substitute two black people, and in this particular instance, let me use the example of two black people, one of Yoruba descent and the other of Hausa Fulani descent, both from Nigeria, the word racism will not be used. Interestingly, nothing is used. It's part of the equation, it's part of the adventure. It's seen as tribal, people choosing their people first. Now let me take it a step further. My name and my last name, as such, and I believe most people will relate to this, is a name that comes from a particular part of the soil in a particular location, in a particular village, in a particular state of a particular country. You can trace most Nigerian names directly back to their specific tribes and their specific states and their specific towns and the villages in said towns, and in certain locations to a particular geographical region. People congregate. We are tribal. Even within a tribe, we are sub-tribal. Now I share this because most Nigerians and most Africans who were born and raised in Africa will relate to the following statements. Your last name is a giveaway. So, for example, if two people were applying for a position in a company, and let's assume the person who is hiring recognizes that both candidates have equal capability, or they are of equal merit. If the hiring manager is Yoruba, it would not be unusual for this person to choose the candidate with the Yoruba name on face value, even before meeting both candidates. In this case, it's a blind selection. We all have biases, tribal biases. These are deeply rooted in our lineage, our genealogy, our histories, our traditions. At the core is that we believe, rightly or wrongly, that the person who has a similarity in ethnicity or race to us will be more likely going to align with our expectations, rightly or wrongly. The reason for that example is to say, in parts of Africa, especially in Nigeria, I can speak to, certain opportunities have obstacles. The obstacles are set before you arrive and have the opportunity to demonstrate why you should be considered. People in Nigeria understand that. People try to overcome that. But people accept that we are tribal as human beings. But for some reason, in the United Kingdom or in the West, we expect those who do not share our ethnic image to behave in a manner remarkably different to how we behave to people who share our ethnic image. We show more preferences to people who speak like us, who have similar values to us, who have similar morals and principles as we do, perhaps those who have similar religions, beliefs as we do. These are all preferences. Now let me bring you over to my experience in the West. As a British subject, I have also had the rare opportunity of living in the 3 sub-nations of Great Britain. I haven't lived in all 4 nations of the United Kingdom. England, Wales, Scotland make up Great Britain. If you include the Northern Ireland, we call that the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, I haven't lived in Northern Ireland. I hope someday, perhaps I do. But I have seen the same tribal experiences in the 3 nations of Great Britain. If you've lived in Wales and with the Welsh, and if you've interacted with the Welsh, and if you have friends, which I do, very close friends, some who I call family, who are Welsh, what you see and observe during your interactions are the same tribal experiences that I had whilst in Nigeria, interacting with the Yorubas, the Fulanis, the Hausas, and the Igbos, and even within the Igbo tribe, dealing with the sub-Igbo tribes. The same preferences exist. The Welsh generally have a historical, I would say, I have to be careful in choosing my words, a historical angst against the English. I saw this very, very heavily. As a matter of fact, I will make a statement, and I think this statement, is true. There is a hatred, historical hatred, that the Welsh have towards the English, and that hatred is passed down to their offsprings. I have seen this. In the majority, the hatred for the sins the English committed towards the Welsh. I should also make it very clear, for all the sins the English committed towards the Welsh. So one could argue, justifiably so. But that hatred exists. It's us against them. The Welsh, unfortunately, I think make up about 5% of the entire population of the United Kingdom, with the English making up about 85%. So there is a relationship that is necessary, but still, the sins of the past have been passed from the former generations to the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th and the 6th, and it keeps going, generations of the English. That same angst is held by the Scots towards the English. Well, the English, for your sins and for our sins, unfortunately have something that we must deal with. I've lived in Scotland for many years. I've lived in Wales for many years. So I speak from experience. Think it not to be the case. Perhaps put on a St. George's shirt and walk into an office. And I remember vividly this happening to me, both in Scotland and in Wales. Now, I use the example to say the following: preferences and the tribal attitudes predates the slave trade, that predates the Middle Ages. We've always been tribal. The Saxons were different people, the Angles were different people. The Anglo-Saxon race is a combination of different people. Before that, we had the Germanic tribe, we had the Romans. We've always been tribal. But we're not defined by our physical attributes. There's something much more, which is where I'd like to bring the conversation to. The reason I have used my experience in Nigeria and my experience in Britain is to say that we are essentially all the same. The behaviors that I have seen and I've experienced dealing with people who share my ethnic image and people who are part of my tribe are no different in Africa as they are in Britain. We just use different words. In Africa, we assume it to be expected. In the West and in Britain, we say, oh, it's racism. But I would say something else that I should make it very clear. I have also found that those who are not British subject or born to Her Majesty's kingdom, or those who perhaps were born to Her Majesty's kingdom and British subjects but were isolated, have a lack of understanding of how the different cultures have more in common than they have as differences. There were 4 steps that were identified, and these steps work. They've been demonstrated to work when applied. It's a formula for success. Whenever you have an interaction or integration between 2 tribes, irrespective of ethnic image, geography, or preferences, or even religion, there are 4 steps. That if you apply these 4 steps, then what you find is that people recognize the humanity in other people and therefore do not talk about their differences. Step 1, education. Step 2, integration. Step 3, assimilation. Step 4, intermarry or intermarriage. Education, integration, assimilation, intermarriage. Step 4 is not always necessary, but it goes a long way because in many ways it means we've combined our families together, so we are one family. Our arms are around each other, and therefore we are one, as opposed to you there and me here. Education is about understanding the history, the culture, the traditions of each party. Assimilation is trying to allow yourself to blend into that culture, that tradition. Integration is putting yourself forward so that you're not isolated. Black people in London would choose locations, Enfield, part of Peckham, part of Brixton, part of East London, to live. There are people who, when they come to London or move to London, they ask, where are the black people? Where do black people live? Rather than integrate into society, they select where people who look like them and, as they assume, have the same values as they do, live. The lack of integration then causes both sides to devalue the other side's uniqueness and virtues, and experiences lived or those gained through learning. And that is part of the issue we have in the United Kingdom. We don't know much or enough about each other. We're not curious, we're not fascinated, we refuse to learn, and therefore we do what we do as human beings, as tribal people. We expect that the other party has bad intentions. I have always, and perhaps this is a recommendation to you, I've always found that if I come in good faith, peaceably, with open arms, that things generally work for me. As a matter of fact, let me state this. I've never had an incident of racism in my entire life. Now, certainly not in Great Britain. Now, when I say this to a lot of people who share my ethnic image, who are British subjects, or perhaps in the West, or Americans, they are stunned. I mean, absolutely stunned. But I can say that with commitment and conviction. I just haven't. We attract who we are. I go into interactions with an understanding that I think perhaps I should share. The understanding is as follows. I am not a physical being. I'm a spiritual being. I've been gifted with an intellect, and I live in a physical body. Myself, the best and the most highest part of who I am, you can say is formless in nature. It's a spiritual form. Yes, the resident within is the same across all people. The intellect and the ability, potential, is gifted to all people. What makes us different is the garment we wear. So I don't judge people simply on their physical garment. We pick up the garment at birth, we take off the garment at death. The garment is not me. Anyone who's lost a loved one, as I have, as you may have, will agree that if you've ever looked at a loved one who's passed away, you stare at the body, the physical garment, and you know that that is not your loved one. The body, you can tell that the spirit has left. I've done this on numerous occasions. You walk around the lifeless body, and I'm shaking my head and saying, but that's not them. There is something about you that is formless, and even, dare I say, weightless in nature. If you weigh someone who is alive and weigh them at death, there's almost no difference. So the uniqueness, the part of you that is eccentric and without, I guess without using superlatives and making it sound too grand, the part of you that is awesome and wonderful is formless in nature, is weightless in nature. And if we can start to look at each other with that, from that prism, that we are all essentially the same, but we're playing different roles, and therefore we wear different garments, and in our interactions, we shouldn't necessarily, despite the tendency to make and form opinions based on the garment, to always do so in good faith, to come peaceably, to expect good things, and not to have our fists ready for war. The United Kingdom is a great country. I've lived in Wales, I've lived in Scotland, I've lived in England, as I do, and it's a great country. Great people, the history is great, people are genuinely very kind. But here is perhaps something that I think most Black people, or people who perhaps do not have the same ancestry lineage as the Anglo-Saxon, fail to understand. This is a deeply deeply. Although it's starting to erode, it's historically a country of class. It's a class society. People don't understand that this is a class society. So many a times, the observations and inferences and conclusions people draw about you has little to do with your ethnic image or the pigmentation of your skin, but more to do with your mannerisms, your decorum, your behavior, your etiquettes, how you present yourself. I talk about self-image, and I use a reference to say there is an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you can keep going until Z of self-image. But let me address the first four, A, B, C, and D of your self-image. There is a self-image within, and there's an external image that people see. Your appearance, your behavior, your communication and style. And in this social media digital age that we find ourselves in, we also have what I call a digital avatar, meaning everything I'm sharing with you presently will be available on some media platform. So my words will become a judge. So in many ways, we use the language of a kingdom, which is to say, when a king speaks, a king is sovereign, and we refer to this in some religions. A king is sovereign until he speaks. Classically, traditionally, until he speaks. Even from the Judeo-Christian faith, this is the case. A king is sovereign until he speaks, because a king and his words are one. But when he speaks, he becomes limited by his word. His word becomes law, so he cannot break his word. So a king is sovereign until he opens his mouth. A queen is sovereign until she speaks. When she speaks, she becomes limited by said words. The word becomes flesh. And in a hierarchy position, the word that has become flesh limits the king. So the digital avatar that we all have, whatever we put out to the world, limits us, because people are forming opinions about what and who we are based on what they see. So one of the things that we have to do, irrespective of your ethnicity or ethnic image, is to carefully craft, manage, maintain, and sometimes reinvent your image, because people will judge you. Some people say, well, people should not judge you before they get to know you. Well, God looks on the inside, man, unfortunately, and fortunately, looks on the outside. We judge first because it's a heuristic, it's a shortcut to determining safety, longevity. We have to judge. If I see a lion, I can assume that the lion will be peaceful. But I have history, thousands of years, that suggests that 99% of the time, the best thing to do will be to find some safe haven. Don't touch the lion, don't pat the lion on the head, because you might get eaten. I have to form a conclusion. So, the United Kingdom is a class society. I have had opportunities, most people have not. And I should say this, a lot of people, although the class society has been watered down, a lot of people believe that the class society is based on whether you went to private school and where you were raised, location-wise. No. Traditionally and historically, we had a society of classes. The king, his barons, and it cascaded down, the people who the king appointed as having high value, and therefore bestowed certain titles too. Such titles these days are paid for and bought, but historically it went to certain families, the lineage. Most people have not come who haven't met people of the aristocrat's background. If you have, you will find that certain people are called his or her lordship. His lordship will be around, and there's a people who, perhaps without revealing too much, there's a people who their lineage go back to barons and baronesses. They have monuments, they have land. That is a class society. And if you have interacted with such groups, what you find is a different level of expectation. They judge you based on your appearance, your behavior, your communication, even how you speak, how you enunciate words, how you pause, the pitch of your voice, the flow of your sentence, the choice and selectivity of words. But they also judge you less so on your digital footprint, because these people are more traditional. But ABC matters. I have said to a lot of people who share my ethnic image that it's more so your behavior, your appearance, and your communication that is at play. You're just not likable. And this is something that is perhaps very hard for Black people to take. I'll go back to the statement I made. Education, assimilation, integration, intermarriage. If you were not educated properly and your parents refused to allow you to be integrated with the rest of society, and you refuse to assimilate, the idea that you will intermarry is out of the question. But the first three would mean that you're interacting with people who both of you are subjects of Her Majesty's kingdom, but you do not understand each other's cultures, values, principles, and histories. As such, it's not impossible for one group, the smaller minority, to scream Hail Mary when they do not get what they want. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with your race. Most of the time, it has more to do with your mannerism. Now, I don't hear the Chinese complain in the UK. I do not hear them complain because I guess they spend so much of their time studying maths and science. And we do not see or hear of them in antisocial behaviors, criminal behaviors. And therefore, have you ever noticed that the ethnic image, the digital ethnic image of a Chinese or someone from the Orient is always in high regard? Appearance-wise, they always dress well. Behavior-wise, they're always soft-spoken and polite. Communication-wise, well, most of the time we may not understand Mandarin, and therefore we don't know what they're saying, but we recognize that when they speak English, they're always very graceful. And in terms of their digital footprint, their digital avatars are very and always contained. Let me bring in a different group. The Asians, the Indians, who make up a big part of the population of the UK. Have you noticed, and this has been my experience, ABCD, appearance, communication, behavior, digital footprint, very similar to the Asians. Where we start to struggle is if you bring in the Anglo-Saxon appearance, behavior, communication, digital footprint. You see a substandard result. For the Anglo-Saxon white, for the Caucasian white, you see a substandard. For the blacks, you see even a wider gap. So keep this in mind. Perhaps it has nothing to do with your race, your skin color, but it has more to do with your attitude, your presence, your behavior, the lack of education, the lack of integration, the lack of assimilation. I have always had great experiences when I interact with people. from different ethnicities, because I go in good faith. As I said before, I have never had a racist experience or an experience that led me to think that someone is prejudging me based on my skin color. It's always been my character and their experience of me. And here is a good question to ask. How do people experience you? And if they told you, would you take the feedback without crying wolf? A useful way to think about interactions. Now, let me bring today's session to perhaps a useful conclusion by addressing 2 or 3 more important issues. Now, the reason I started with Nigeria and Britain and trying to bring it together is to say this. In my interactions, when I visit and if I visit any country, I have found that most people come to me first. And sometimes there is a stare. They look at you because they're looking at your appearance. Then they watch your behavior. Then they watch how you communicate. And if they can, they always ask what your name is so that they can do some research to see what your digital footprint is. I have found, irrespective of geography, country, location, people interact with me along the same 3 ABCDs. Appearance. And by appearance, sometimes it's just a smile. You don't have a hard face. You have a... Let me say this before, because I think it's important. People meet you first before they see you. People meet you first. There's a meeting of spirits first before there's a meeting of the flesh, of the physical. So it's not impossible to walk into a space and see someone, and from a distance, you know that you will get along with that person. Their spirit is resonating at a vibration, at a frequency that has positive energy. Faith-filled, love-filled, peace-filled. There are other times that you walk into a space and you see someone from a distance and you know that you will not get along with said person. There's a feeling of fear, anxiety, lack, anger, negativity, because we are spiritual beings. We radiate. Energy radiates, and so we can see who we are in resonance with, even without meeting people. So, one of the good things is to ask people, how do they experience you? And make the necessary changes. Now, in bringing today's session to a close, let me say the following. If you are one of those people who always, you lead with your sex or your race, it means you don't have much to offer to the world, or you are not aware of how much you have to offer to the world. I started today's session by saying those who complain either lack a purpose or haven't come to the understanding of their purpose. They do not have an assignment that they think life is given to them. They're not as busy as they should be. They're not competitive. Now, you see, I don't believe in circumstances. Never have. I believe that those, such as myself, who do not find circumstances that they want in life are destined to create the circumstances that they wish to have. Now, that came from George Bernard Shaw. He said, I don't believe in circumstances. Those who succeed in this life are those who look for the circumstances that they want, and if they cannot find it, they create them. So, if you're waiting for a hand up or a hand out, of course, you would be attentive to what the person giving you the hand out or the hand up thinks about you. On the other hand, if you are the person looking to give other people a lift up, not a handout, a lift up, then all your focus should be on how can I excel and make myself valuable to the group? How can I serve as many people as possible? Now, let me close by saying the following, make the following statements. I have met people, close people, friends, who share my ethnic image, who have had racist slurs and experiences. I have. I take nothing away from such experiences. There are bad people everywhere. A broken clock is correct twice in every 24 hours, but we do not use the broken clock to keep the time. There are exceptions to the rule, but it's the exception that proves the rule. As a matter of fact, the exception does not disprove the rule. Of course, in every single part of the world, there are people who are tribal, who use prejudice, who have preferences, who have standards. And so they should. We have all the same thing. We express those in different ways. Religion, tastes, love for music, love for art, selecting our friends, selecting our loved ones. These are preferences. Who are we to judge other people's preferences? Now, my focus has always been on my purpose, my goals, my dreams, my expectations, and my source. I leave you with the following statements. 4 S's: source, supply, seed, and seasons. Source, supply, seed, and seasons. If you believe your source and your supply is the white man, then of course, like a slave you are, you expect the slave master to control the seasons and therefore give you the seed you need. If you believe that the universe, God, whatever you choose, term you choose, is your source and your supply, and you believe that your source and supply controls the seasons, and therefore the seed comes from above, comes from within, comes from without, then you simply expect great things in your life without reference to who is used as the conduit to bring that seed to you. At the core, there are people who are on the pitch playing the game of life and having a great time. Win, lose, or draw, having a great time. There are those who are on the stands watching the game rather than get involved with the game, despite the game and the pitch being open to everyone. But there are those who are watching and who are not happy, and who are identifying things that they see from a distance, sometimes not understanding the rules of the game, and calling out such observations as objectively true across the whole population. Generalizations are broadly true because they are a combination of all the anecdotal experiences of so many people. I'll leave you with the following statement. If you perhaps are not living in the United Kingdom and you were to, I guess, watch a program on a channel in the United Kingdom, one of the things you would have observed in between programs are adverts. Since the past 3 years, since the death of George Floyd, something has changed. Now, I don't have a television, I haven't had one for decades, but when I have visited other people's homes and I've come across adverts, over the past 2.5 years, I was stunned at a change. There was a 50-50 representation of a black person and a white person in all the adverts. It's almost as though prior to 3 years ago, you could watch TV and see adverts, and I never noticed those who were in the adverts. Suddenly there was a change. It felt as though they were force feeding you this idea that black people and white people are of the same number in the UK. I have asked a few friends the same question I am going to ask you. What population do you believe black people on the aggregate make up in the United Kingdom or in Great Britain? Let's use the United Kingdom to cover all the 4 sub-nations. If you watch the television adverts, you will assume it's 50-50. Let me share the reality with you. And I'll use numbers that are very perhaps simple to understand. In the United Kingdom, you would have to go through 8.5 people who are white first. The remaining 1.5 are split into other subgroups. Black people make up less than half of one. So in the United Kingdom, black people are roughly about 4.7% of the whole population. 4.7% of the entire population. 4.7% of the entire population. And this is including black Caribbeans, black British, black Africans, mixed race. 4.7%. So less than one person. Now, statistically speaking, if I had 2 groups and I decided, based on population alone and the aggregation of population by group, it is statistically impossible to pick out from one group randomly 50% and there would be black people. It is statistically impossible if the population size is as follows: roughly 84% white, 4.7% black, and the remaining are other races, Indians, Pakistanis, etc. There are more Indians, if you look at the Indian, Pakistani, Asian group, are larger groups than the blacks. But if you were to watch adverts, and if you look through society, and if you look at this inclusivity, diversity, equity nonsense, it's all targeted towards black people. And here is the question: the Indians are not complaining, the Chinese are not complaining, those who are from the American continent, north or south, are not complaining, the Australians are not complaining, those who are minorities in the country are getting on with life and competing. Blacks are the only ones complaining, despite what I call the uneven advantage being skewed in their favor. That was what I referred to at the start when I said that the death of George Floyd would do more harm because we've reintroduced preferences, reverse discrimination favoring one group without looking at the entire holistic picture, to the point that we're promoting people to their level of incompetence. And so, unfortunately, we're reinforcing things that we already know. If I wanted to watch basketball and you told me that the lineup were black people, I know it would be a great game. And if you said one lineup was blacks and the other was Japanese, I could bet with conviction who would win. If there was a math test and one group were Asian, South Korea, China, Japan, and the other group were Anglo-Saxons, I can bet with accuracy which group will win. It would be the Asians. Stereotypes matter. And so as I bring this to a close, let me say the following. You have to be good enough to play the game of life. It's not about your skin color, your gonads, or the melanin content of your skin. And I should say this, There is nothing really, I should say, there's nothing special about being a man. There's nothing really special about being a black man. Being black is not really special. Being a man is not very special. Being a person who has gone through life and the journeys I've had to go through, the challenges, the upsets, the tears, the failures, the successes, my blueprints on my journey and my experiences and relationships with people is what is special. The things that are part of me that are incidental, I played no part. The color of my eyes, the texture of my hair, the color of my skin, these are incidental features, things that I was given. What matters is what I created. Your value is not based on the the color of your skin, but based on what you create. Go into the world and be a person of value, and people will draw of your skin color. Now, I hope that's been useful.